Krishna.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Kunja Vihari ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you all for joining us this morning for our final session on the Madhurya Kadambini of Viśvanātha Ṭhākura. We've covered the first 8 stages of Bhakti, from faith all the way up to Bhava, over the past 4 weeks. And now we're going to conclude with a discussion of Prema, at which one attains the Lord, and a review of the whole process of how the devotee's identity is gradually spiritualized. This is given in the Madhurya Kadambini at the end of the book. Viśvanātha Ṭhākura gives a kind of review or summary. So we'll also do the same, and we'll also take the opportunity to cover some of the points and just touch on some of the different aspects of the stages which we've already covered. All right. So I'll share my screen. So this is the 5th session. And we'll just get right into the invocation verses because we'll do the review at the end. Hridva prenava bhakti shasya vitate sanjivani svagama rambhe kamata pardudahadamani vishvapagolhasini duran me marushakino pisarasi bhavaya bhuyat prabhu Shri Chaitanya kripanirankushamaha Mādhurya Kādambinī. The mercy of Swayam Bhagavan, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is like a limitless, uncontrolled cloud bank of extraordinary nectar, Madhurya, that falls like rain on the heart of the sadhaka. The shower of the Lord's mercy fully bestows vitality upon the crops of the 9-fold limbs of devotion, such as Shravana and Kirtana, hearing and chanting, that have been freshly sown in the field of the practitioner's heart. Even the first appearance of the cloud bank of Mahaprabhu's mercy dispels the virulent, burning sensation felt during the summer season, the various material desires for one's own enjoyment, and makes jubilation swell within the heart of all devotees throughout the universe, like rivers swelling from rainfall. May that unrestrained and unlimitedly powerful cloud bank of Sriman Mahaprabhu's sweet mercy, the influence of which is felt even from a great distance, fill me, a dry, lifeless tree in the desert, with life-giving rasa. This is Viśvanātha Ṭhākura's prayer at the outset of the Madhurya Kadambini. He's glorifying the Lord. His mercy, the Lord's mercy, being this cloud bank of nectar that's pouring down. And also glorifying the process of devotional service, which is nourished by this rainfall of mercy, this downpour of mercy. And he's praying that he can also benefit from that downpour. Of course, it's his humility. He is an extremely elevated devotee, immersed in rasa, or loving sentiments for the Lord. And the next invocation verse that Viśvanātha Ṭhākura includes is Bhakti Purvai Shrita Tantu Rasam Pashyad Yad Atadhi Tam Naumi Satatam Rupa Nama Priya Janam Hare. The most elevated saints, Mahajanas of former times, also accepted the shelter of Bhakti Devi. Now, however, by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by the mercy of his most dear associate, Sri Rupa Goswami, people who have obtained real intelligence are directly perceiving Bhakti in its form of Bhakti Rasa. I offer my heartfelt obeisances unto Sri Rupa Goswami again and again. So although Bhakti was practiced in former times, its Bhakti is glorified throughout the Vedas as the best of all processes of spiritual elevation. And especially it's glorified in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So people were reading Srimad Bhagavatam, studying Srimad Bhagavatam. There were commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. However, it wasn't until Rupa Goswami wrote the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that the science of rasa, the science of bhakti, was elaborately described. That bhakti is not just love of God, but there's so many varieties within that love. And Rupa Goswami specifically explained the divisions of bhakti rasa so that devotees can appreciate the love that Krishna's eternal associates have for him. And in that appreciating, aspire to cultivate a similar mood. This is the final session we'll have on Madhurya Kadambini, pure love of Godhead. So what is Prema? The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami defines Prema in this verse. Samyanma srinita svanto mamatvati shayankitaha bhavasa eva sandratma budhai prema nigadyate. When bhava completely softens the heart, is marked by a great feeling of possessiveness toward the Lord and becomes extremely condensed, the learned call it prema. So prema is that same bhava which manifested in the heart of the living entity, but fully ripened or fully mature. So the spiritual emotions that awaken in the heart of the living being increase and multiply and become more and more intense, and one's feeling of possessiveness for the Lord becomes complete, all-encompassing. And that is the stage of Prema Bhakti. So Viśvanātha Ṭhākura writes, from the creeper of Bhakti, which first sprouted 2 leaves during sadhana Bhakti, now suddenly appear many smooth petals in the form of anubhavas attached to the flower of bhava. These anubhavas are filled with the devotional processes such as hearing and chanting, and shine brilliantly at every moment. So anubhava means an expression of ecstasy, anu meaning following, and bhava meaning spiritual ecstasy or spiritual emotion. So in the stage of bhava and prema, one's performance of devotional service is spontaneous. It's an automatic expression of his love. In the practitioner's life, in the stage of sadhana, we have to kind of force ourselves by strength of our intelligence to practice bhakti. Our feelings may not always be supportive. You know, we may intellectually convince ourselves to wake up early in the morning and chant, but our mind will be distracted, may even be a little bit rebellious. But in the stages of bhava and prema, by that time, the mind is fully on board, fully absorbed in devotional service. And as a result of that, that ecstasy one feels in the mind, that ecstatic love, one engages in different practices of bhakti according to one's taste. So these are different anubhavas. And we'll just say one more thing about this, is they're compared to petals, beautiful petals on the flower of bhava. When a plant is developing, first it sprouts leaves, then flowers, and then fruit. So the flowers of this bhakti creeper are compared to bhava, and the fruits are prema. So some further descriptions of prema. It's the fully risen sun of bhava. So bhava bhakti, when the living entity performs bhakti with attachment, asakti, for a sustained period of time, the Lord is pleased and is, let's say, convinced that the devotee is sincere and committed, dedicated. And then the Lord reciprocates with that devotee's sincerity and dedication by bestowing his own internal potency. A ray of the internal potency enters into the heart of the jiva, the practitioner. And that ray is bhava bhakti. It's Shuddha Sattva Vishesh Atma. It's composed of a special transformation of the Shuddha Sattva, the internal potency. It's a combination of the Samvit and the Hladini Shaktis, which is the blissful energy of Krishna and his cognizance energy, Samvit. So these two enter into the heart of the living entity and make him fully aware of his spiritual identity, and he tastes bliss in that relationship with the Lord. And that is the first ray of spiritual light coming from the Krishna sun, you could say, that's rising on the horizon of our spiritual life. And when that sun, that Krishna sun, fully rises in the sky, then we are bathed in the sunlight of spiritual life. In Prema, one's mental functions are completely spiritualized, being immersed in rasa. So right now, our mind is constantly agitated as it tries to orchestrate various types of material enjoyment for itself, basically. We're thinking, what am I going to eat today? What am I going to do at this place? What am I going to do in this relationship? What am I going to do in this project? And the mind is constantly trying to orchestrate for its own happiness and avoiding, arranging for pleasure and avoiding pain. But this is all prakrita rasa, or material rasa, material enjoyment, material pleasure. When a devotee attains bhava, then their mind is taken over by that spiritual love. And so all of the activities of the mind, which the Vedas describe are threefold: thinking, feeling, and willing. Those three activities are now driven by love of Krishna, this bhava, or this spiritual ecstasy, this spiritual emotion. So instead of constantly thinking, how will I obtain material pleasure, the devotee on the level of bhava and prema is thinking, how can I give pleasure to the Lord? And this is the basis of spiritual rasa, bhakti rasa, is a desire to give pleasure to the Lord, and the byproduct of that is oneself experiences that pleasure, partakes in that pleasure that the Lord is the pleasure of service, of offering oneself in service. So the devotee becomes immersed in rasa, and all of the functions of the mind are completely spiritualized. Whereas in bhava, they're spiritualized, but not completely, completely, but not mature. So this is the mature. Prema is like the mature stage of bhava. Prema binds. This is all described by Viśvanātha Ṭhākura. These bullet points, I'm just summarizing his statements in this chapter 8 of the Madhurya Kadambini. Prema binds one's mental functions to the sweetness of the Lord's name, form, qualities, and pastimes by the strong ropes of transcendental possessiveness. So in addition to one's mental functions being spiritualized, one's sense of mine, what belongs to me, is fully spiritualized and is exclusively invested in the Lord. I don't think of when I think of mine, what do I have in this world? The only thing I think is Krishna and his service. I have no other meaningful responsibilities or possessions aside from Krishna's service. And so by that possessiveness, which the possessiveness acts like a strong rope or a chain binding the devotee's mind to the Lord and forcing us to drink from the sweet nectar of Krishna. That's prema. It's as more, we can't even fathom how addictive and all consuming this love is, and the experience, the direct experience of Krishna is. We can get a glimpse of it by considering material addicts, how they behave, how they speak, how they feel. It consumes their life. The addiction consumes their life, and addiction acts like a strong rope binding them to that object. They can't give it up, even if they tried. It's very difficult. Only by developing a higher taste can one give up an addiction to a lower taste. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. However, when it comes to Krishna and Krishna Bhakti, there is no higher taste. So it's a permanent addiction, but it's a good addiction. It's a spiritual addiction. So this is the strong rope of transcendental possessiveness. So in the definition of bhakti, Rupa Goswami has given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the word anushilana comes, Krishna anushilanam, which means a cultivation. So it's described by Jiva Goswami in his commentary to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that this anushilana, or this cultivation of love, has two types, two divisions, Cheshta Rupa and Bhava Rupa. The Cheshta Rupa is the bhakti that we express through our actions, the act of sweeping the temple, of performing archana, deity worship, waving the incense, waving the chamara fan, etc. Chanting, the act of chanting Krishna's names, talking about Krishna. All of these things are performed through the actions of one's body, mind, and words. Sorry, just the actions of one's body and words. Bhava Rupa is expressed through one's mind, their emotions, their thoughts. Bhava Rupa only develops in the stage of Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti. So previously, a sadhaka, a practitioner, we are performing sadhana bhakti through our actions externally for the purpose of cultivating an internal feeling of love, bhava. But in the stage of prema, the devotee has this love, and being impelled by this love, they perform acts of devotional service. So that's the kind of distinction between the stage of practice and perfection. And it's the same activities in practice and perfection, but the quality is completely different. So that's just one thing we can meditate on. Jiva Goswami further explains, as with any verb, the word anushilana must be understood through the various meanings of its verbal root, shila. The meaning of the verbal root shila, to cultivate, practice, to serve or worship, to meditate or contemplate, is twofold. Pravrityatmika, the meaning expressed through action, and nivrityatmika, the meaning expressed through inaction. Thus, the meaning of the root shila has both an active form, cheshta rupa, fulfilled through the body, words, or mind, and an emotional form, bhava rupa, fulfilled through the natural mental states like affection, priti, and despair, vishada. However, if Shuddha Sattva is not present, the emotions of the mind fall into the cheshta rupa category. What that means is that our mind there is a way in which we can kind of force our mind or direct our mind willingly, like, now I'm going to pay attention to the holy name while I chant. Now I'm going to think of Krishna's form. I'm going to remember and recall in my mind. There's a way in which one's mental activities can be active by the force of one's own determination or desire. But that's different than the type of mental activity of a devotee on the level of prema, where there's no like force required. It's just a very natural attraction, spontaneous attraction. The two splendors of prema are, or the two glories or qualities of prema are Sandrananda Visheshatma and Sri Krishna Akarshani. That prema is composed of very condensed bliss. So the happiness that one experiences throughout the practice of bhakti, Shubhada was discussed in that bhakti bestows all good qualities. That was discussed in sadhana. It's a glory of sadhana bhakti. That same happiness becomes extremely, extremely, extremely condensed and unique, because it's the Hladini Shakti directly has manifested in the heart of the living entity. And by that Hladini Shakti, Krishna becomes attracted to the devotee and even comes under the influence and control of the devotee. This is Sri Krishna Karshani. So these are the two qualities of prema bhakti. Regarding the happiness of prema, one verse is quoted in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Brahmanando Bhavedesha Chetparardha Gunikrita Naiti Bhakti Sukham Bodhe Paramanu Turamapi. The bliss of merging into the featureless aspect of the absolute truth, obtained after resolute meditation samadhi for over 50 years of Brahma's lifespan, does not compare to even a drop of the ocean of bliss of devotional service. So this is the happiness of prema, is one drop of prema is more relishable than practically like what's being said here literally is 50 years of Brahma's lifespan, which is half the duration of the universe. It's like 150 trillion years of samadhi. In 150 trillion years of samadhi, one experiences maybe something that approaches, and it doesn't even approach. It can't even be compared. It's not even paramanu tulamapi, that it doesn't even compare to a drop of the ocean of bliss of devotional service, of bhakti. So prema is so superlatively pleasurable that no other types of pleasure, even the happiness of Brahmananda, samadhi, liberation, impersonal liberation, can't compare. It can't compare. And regarding controlling Krishna, this is a verse from the Bhagavatam. Narada Muni says, "O Yudhishthira, of all the people on this earth, your good fortune is exceedingly glorious, because the absolute truth, Parabrahma, the all-pervading supersoul, has taken a human-like form and secretly lives in your palace. Great saintly persons who purify the entire creation again and again visit you to take his darshan." So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita serves as the chariot driver of Arjuna. This is a nice illustration of how Krishna becomes subordinate to his devotees who have prema for him. Similarly, he acted as the counselor and messenger for the Pandavas. God himself became the messenger. Normally, when we talk about God, we talk about others being his messenger. The prophets, they're the messengers of God. They carry his message to the people. But for a devotee who has prema, Krishna becomes the messenger of his devotee and goes and tries to negotiate peace with Duryodhana on behalf of the Pandavas to avoid the war at Kurukshetra. Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his eternal form as the son of Yashoda, who's now grown up and who's performing his dramatic pastimes as the king of Dwarka and the ally of the Pandavas, the brothers, headed by Yudhishthira. He takes on the role of their messenger because of their love for him. So the next section will be a description of a devotee with prema. These are some excerpts from the Madhurya Kadambini. And because they're very They're very vivid descriptions and very powerful descriptions. I wanted to basically quote a lot of them, just kind of like we did last week, about descriptions of a devotee on the level of bhava and asakti. A devotee beginning to delight in bhakti rasa immediately becomes intoxicated by it and is no longer concerned for any obstacle. What else can be said? In this condition, he loses all sense of self, just as a valiant warrior becomes fully absorbed in battle, or a thief preoccupied with his greed to secure a great treasure loses all discrimination and hesitation. So we talk about, in the Western psychological field, they talk about a flow state, like a sports player gets into a flow state. And this is lauded and praised as like the ideal state of consciousness, no doubts, no metacognition, just in the moment. So that's like a perverted reflection of what a devotee experiences in prema. They know exactly who they are and what their purpose is, and they do it as if effortlessly, just spontaneously. There's no question of obstacles. There's no question of hesitation. There's just a total absorption and greed or eagerness to serve the Lord. The devotee's longing to meet with Bhagavan is like an insatiable hunger that persists even after feasting day and night on endless quantities of the most delectable foodstuffs of the 4 varieties. There's 4 varieties of foods based on their texture and how they're eaten. This is described. Chatur Vidhashri Bhagavat Prasado. It's something like foods that are licked, sucked, drunk, and chewed, something like that, based on their texture. So for a meal to be especially relishable, it should have a variety of all these types of food. The tastes are variegated and the textures are variegated. Then it creates a very, very wonderful sensation in the mouth. And so even after feasting on all these the best of all preparations, of all varieties, for a full day and night, imagine a hunger that was so great that even after that, one still felt hungry. We can hardly eat for a half an hour or an hour continuously, but imagine for 24 hours feasting and still feeling hungry. That kind of burning hunger is the devotee's longing for Bhagavan, for the Lord in prema. This eagerness burns within him like the blazing sun. But then at that very moment, a spurti, momentary vision, manifests, cooling him like millions of moons. And he delights in the endless beauty, qualities, and sweetness of Bhagavan. At the stage of prema, the devotee burns in separation from the Lord and is simultaneously cooled by this spurti or vision of him. Such is the astonishing nature of prema. In this state, the devotee's friends and family relations appear like a dark, dried up well, and his house like a forest of thorns. Eating food becomes utterly painful. Praise from other devotees becomes like the bite of a poisonous snake. Daily duties become like death. His every limb feels burdensome. Consolation from confidants feels like a shower of poison. His constant wakefulness is an ocean of repentance, and whatever little sleep he gets makes him feel that he has squandered his life. Even having a body seems like bearing punishment meted out by the Lord, and his life breath feels as useless as paddy that has been repeatedly burned. That's rice. Whatever he previously constantly cherished is now an utter disruption, not to speak of anything else. Even any thought of Bhagavan devastates him. The reason he's devastated is because the thought of the Lord reminds him of his separation from the Lord. This is seen in the 10th canto when the gopis long to forget Krishna, because at every moment they're constantly remembering him. Everything that they see in Vrindavan reminds them of Krishna, and it's the most unbearable pain because he's absent. Now, at the same time, on the transcendental platform, this pain is the greatest pleasure, but subjectively speaking, these devotees feel that separation as a great anguish. we see this in the material world also, that love and separation, although it's very agonizing and upsetting, there's a kind of relish to it, a pleasure to it. Growing up, I used to listen to emo music. So this is, the subject matter, the topics of every song is, I love this girl and she doesn't love me back. Or I love this girl and then she moved away. And now I'm so sad, I don't know what to say. And these songs, just every song is the same theme of unrequited love, or love that's been lost, or love that I know won't last forever. And there's a kind of a pleasure in the sadness. So this is like a perverted reflection of the transcendental reality, that thinking of the Lord is unbearably sweet. And as we're reminded of our own separation from the Lord, we experience that sweetness simultaneously coupled with a kind of unbearable transcendental agony that's also pleasurable. Another way we can understand it is that in the material reality that we're in right now, even pleasure is nothing but a transformation of dukkha, pain. Everything in the material world is pain because it's temporary. So the so-called pleasure is just a precursor to pain. So even so-called material happiness is actually a type of suffering. This is the revelation of the Buddha. Dukkha was the first of the Four Noble Truths. Everything is dukkha. Everything is a transformation of suffering in the material world. So similarly, in the spiritual world, everything is a transformation of sukha, or spiritual happiness. Even the apparent distress, it's a transformation of happiness, but it still has the quality, the subjective quality of distress. So the devotee feels devastated, feels like he cannot maintain his life, even though he's feeling ecstasy. So it's not something we can really appreciate with our rational mind. We have to get some experience of it. It's like any aesthetic thing. If you want to know how an apple tastes, you have to eat it. You can't rationally understand the taste of an apple. You can kind of by comparing it to other fruits. Let's say you haven't eaten an apple, but you've eaten a pear. Well, it's a little bit similar if it's a crunchy pear. If it's a soft pear, it's not as similar. So you have to make some comparisons based on what's within the realm of your experience. But ultimately, you have to experience it. So we can only repeat the words that we've heard and try to describe it based on these various analogies, but ultimately we won't know until we experience it. So even in meeting, when the Lord's most intimate devotees, the gopis, are united with him, like dancing with him or in a secluded place with him, talking, joking, etc. In the back of their mind, they're also feeling anxiety about, as they know, they realize that this moment will not last. Soon Krishna will have to go back to his home and I'll again be separated from him. So there's this constant tension between spiritual happiness and spiritual distress, the happiness of being with the Lord and the distress of imminent separation or current separation. But even that separation is extremely pleasurable. It's a transcendental pleasure. It's the most pleasurable. So these are just some points about this statement that even the thought of the Lord devastates the devotee. It's a transcendental devastation. Attaining the Lord. Thereafter, the magnet of Prema attracts the iron-like Sri Krishna and at any time brings him directly before the devotee's vision. Sri Bhagavan then makes the supremely auspicious qualities of his Svarupa, his beauty, his fragrance, his sweet voice, his tender touch, the savor of his lips, his magnanimity, and his compassion, perceivable to the eyes and other senses of the devotee. So these are all five aspects these are the five departments of the senses: is vision, smell, sound, touch, and taste. So the perfection of each of our senses is found in the form of Krishna and the person of Krishna. The fulfillment of our senses is to come in contact with Krishna. So when a devotee has prema, then the Lord manifests before that devotee in person and blesses that devotee with an experience of himself. The following comparisons give some idea of the ecstasy experienced by a premi bhakta, or a devotee who has prema, love for the Lord. First, these are three examples given by Viśvanātha Ṭhākura. The elation of a traveler who, having long traversed a desert path scorched by the rays of the summer sun, comes upon the shade of an enormous banyan tree thick with foliage on the bank of the Ganga. That place is drenched with ice-cold water kept in hundreds of pots under the tree. So imagine traversing in a desert for days and days and days without food or water, in a hot summer, being burned, one's very skin being burned, feeling like you're just going to melt into a puddle of sweat if you don't just dry up. And then coming to the Ganga with an enormous banyan tree. A banyan tree has prop roots that shoot down from the branches. The branches go out horizontally, and then the prop roots shoot down to create just a vast network, like a forest but it's just one tree. So as one enters into that shelter of that banyan tree, then it's completely shaded. There's thick foliage, and Viśvanātha Ṭhākura is describing that in this imagination, this meditation, there's also clay pots filled with cool, fresh water that one can just drink to his heart's content. So the contrast of those two experiences gives us some idea of what prema is like for the devotee. Another one is the elation of wild elephants that had long suffered a blazing forest fire when torrents of rain finally pour down from a cloud bank. So imagine group of elephants in a forest, and they're surrounded by fire. Their whole home is burning down around them. They can't escape. They're being burned. They're crying out. It's painful. It's frightening. They think that death is imminent. And then all of a sudden, rain starts to fall in torrents and immediately extinguishes the fire. The elation of a person who, having been afflicted with numerous chronic illnesses and craving to experience taste, finally savors sweet ambrosia. So a person who's deathly ill, unable to eat or drink, is on their deathbed practically, and then they experience they recover and are able to taste food again and drink and relish that. So these are just three analogies Viśvanātha Ṭhākura gives us to give us some sense of what prema is like. So, attaining the Lord. First, Sri Bhagavan manifests his beauty before the eyes of the utterly astonished devotee. The influence of Bhagavan's sweetness as it manifests before the devotee's sense of sight is such that all the devotee's senses, even his mind, become like the eyes. The devotee's darshan is interrupted by ecstatic transformations, sattvika vikar, such as becoming stunned, hirpulation, or hirpulation is when the hairs of the body stand on end, and tears, and in bliss he loses consciousness. At that time, in order to revive the devotee, the Lord reveals his second sweetness, his bodily fragrance, which permeates the devotee's sense of smell. In the material world, we have to wear cologne, we have to wear perfume, we have to wear deodorant, but Krishna, he's bathed with fresh water coming from the Yamuna that's scented with all kinds of wonderful fragrances. And this infuses his body, which is naturally very fragrant, with even more wonderful fragrances. So just by himself, he smells so intoxicating. That permeates the devotee's sense of smell and revives the devotee. There's this smelling salts. In traditional medicine, one would give a fainted person smelling salt to revive him. So in this case, the Lord's smell, the scent of the Lord, his musk, his odor, enters the devotee's nostril, and they immediately wake up. What is that amazing fragrance? Again, by the influence of Bhagavan's extraordinarily sweet bodily aroma, all the devotee's senses take on the function of nostrils, and he begins to lose consciousness for a second time. The idea is that, anyway, I can't say I have perfect realization of what's being said here, that the senses take on the qualities of the eyes or the nostrils. In the spiritual reality, one's senses can perform the functions of each other. So like Krishna, when we offer him bhoga on the altar, the food that we offer him, he sees it and he eats it through his eyes. He may not actually take a bite. Your deity usually won't reach out his hand and eat some of the rice or sabji that you offer him. But through his eyes, he's tasting it. There's a verse like this in the Brahma-Samhita that we recite normally in ISKCON temples when we greet the deity. Anya angani yasya sakalendriya vritti manti. That the Lord's senses can perform the functions of each other. So similarly, for a pure devotee, one's senses can perform the functions of each other. So one becomes fully absorbed in that experience. All one's other senses become completely inert and lend their strength to the primary sense that's experiencing Krishna through his scent or through his vision, his sight, etc. That's another way we can understand it. And due to this great fragrance, the devotee again begins to lose consciousness. To pacify his devotee, the Lord says, "My dear devotee, I am fully subservient to you. I am your property. Don't be anxious. Let your experience of me fulfill your every desire." In this way, Bhagavan manifests his third sweetness, the mellifluousness of his voice, his sausvarya, to the ears of the devotee. By hearing that sweet voice as before, the devotee's other senses become like ears, and the devotee faints for a third time. We have probably some experience of hearing the voice of a dear friend and just feeling so comforted and happy to hear the voice of our friend. Or hearing the voice of our child and feeling so charmed and delighted to hear our child's sweet voice. Or hearing the voice of a lover, a beautiful woman or a beautiful man, and being intoxicated and attracted by that voice. So Krishna's voice is like that. It's depending on our mood of love for him, then our voice will have his voice, Krishna's voice, will just sound like music, like just the sweetest music to our ears that just causes our whole body and mind to become limp and inert as we fall into that, the sound of his voice. And the devotee faints for a third time, hearing Krishna's voice. And all of his senses become like ears. Then Bhagavan, full of compassion, bestows the experience of his fourth sweetness, his tender touch, the tender touch of his lotus feet, hands, or chest. Bhagavan awards the touch of his feet, Krishna awards the touch of his feet to the heads of the devotees who are in the mood of servitude. He takes the hands of the devotees who are in the mood of fraternal love, sakya. He takes their hands in his own lotus hands. He wipes away with his hands the tears of his devotees who possess parental affection for him. And he embraces with his two arms those devotees imbued with amorous love, touching their chests to his, which is marked with Srivatsa. In this way, it should be understood that Bhagavan manifests his tender touch according to the bhava of the devotee. The devotee then loses consciousness for a fourth time. After this, as the Premi Bhakta begins to fall into a fourth deep swoon, Sri Bhagavan, Krishna, manifests his fifth sweetness, namely the sweet taste of his lips, which the devotee savors. He reveals the confidential aspect of this charming sweetness to those in the mood of a female sweetheart. So this is especially reserved for the devotees in Madhurya Rasa. But Yashoda also, she'll kiss Krishna on the cheeks. We hear in the Damodar Ashtakam that Krishna's cheeks are reddened by the kisses of his mother and the other elder gopis. So somehow or other, maybe the cowherd friends, they'll taste a laddu that Krishna has taken a bite of. So in that way, they get some of Krishna's remnants. So it's will come differently for different devotees, but the most confidential, or let's say complete experience of what Krishna tastes like is reserved for devotees in who have this conjugal love, romantic love for Krishna. As before, the devotee's experience of losing consciousness in these ecstatic moods reaches such magnificent depths that Bhagavan Krishna, unable to revive the devotee by any other means, bestows his sixth Madhurya, his sixth sweetness, his magnanimity, his forceful and simultaneous bestowal of the charming sweetness of all the previously mentioned qualities, such as beauty, upon the eyes and other senses of the Premi Bhakta is his quality of magnanimity. In other words, he manifests himself fully. He gives a complete experience of himself to the devotee, such that all of the devotee's spiritual senses are inundated by Krishna's different sweetnesses, different qualities, and the devotee is overwhelmed by the Lord's sweetness and beauty and grace. At that time, Prema, love, understanding the indication of Sri Bhagavan, increases exponentially and causes the devotee's hankering to swell accordingly. In this way, Bhagavan accepts the role of the moon, and powerfully agitating the ocean of bliss within the devotee's heart, he manifests hundreds upon hundreds of waves, buffeting and simultaneously overwhelming it. So these are the sanchari bhavas. There's a sthayi bhav, is the fixed mood of love that the devotee possesses for the Lord, which is intrinsic to their identity as the Lord's friend or lover, or so on and so on. And sanchari bhavas are transitory ecstasies that arise from the ocean of sthayi bhav like waves and expand it, increase it, it churns one's sthayi bhav, augments one's love, and then merge back into the ocean of sthayi bhav. These transitory ecstasies, sanchari bhav, like different feelings, auxiliary feelings one will have for Krishna. In this way, he personally rules the devotee's mind as its presiding deity, expanding his energy in such a manner that the devotee, now unimpeded by tears, fainting, and so on, begins to simultaneously taste in the core of his heart the sweetness of all of Bhagavan Krishna's qualities, such as his beauty. Finally, the Lord says to the devotee, "O best of my devotees, for so many lifetimes you have abandoned your wife, home, wealth, and so forth for me. Only to serve me have you endured a multitude of miseries, such as cold, wind, hunger, thirst, pain, and disease. You totally disregarded the insults of others and maintained your life by begging. Unable to repay you, I have become indebted to you. For you, lordship over the entire earth, sovereignty of the heavenly planets, even the position of Lord Brahma and the various mystic perfections are completely unsuitable. How could I grant them to you? Grass, straw, and bran, which animals find enjoyable, are not fit for humans. Thus, even though I am unconquerable, today you have conquered me. In this condition, I depend solely on your goodwill." So here, Krishna is addressing his devotee as best of my devotees. To Krishna, everyone is his best devotee. He has unlimited affection for every devotee. It's like a parent. A good parent thinks each of their children is best. They don't have, in that sense, they don't have favorites. So although Krishna does have, extra affection for devotees, according to the degree of affection they have for him, he reciprocates according to the intensity of his devotees' affection. He also feels every devotee is absolutely perfect and wonderful and best. And so the devotee, for lifetimes, generally bhakti matures over the course of lifetimes, the devotee has been endeavoring to develop love for the Lord, enduring all kinds of sacrifices, and that will look different according to the devotee's unique position externally, whether they're in the Grihastha ashram or renunciate or doing this service or that service for the Lord. But the common quality of all of them is that they completely give up all desire for any kind of worldly enjoyment or impersonal liberation, including being promoted to the position of Brahma, including being rewarded with all of the 8 mystic perfections, all the yogic siddhis. To them, these are just like the hay at Goloka Prema Dham, our farm here. The cows eat hay. But when I feed Yashoda her hay, I don't lick my lips and get jealous. I wish I could chomp on that, because I have my human meals that I eat. So similarly for a devotee, their meal, their foodstuff, their nourishment is bhakti and bhakti rasa. And to them, the happinesses of the material world are just like animal fodder. So the Lord is making that comparison. He says, although I am unconquerable, today you have conquered me. Now I depend solely on your goodwill. That's Krishna speaking to his devotee. So then the devotee in response prays, O Prabhu, O Lord, O ocean of mercy, dragged by the current of this dreadful material existence, I am caught in a whirlpool of suffering and being devoured by crocodiles. The crocodiles are one's various material desires, the urgings of lust, anger, greed, etc. Seeing this, compassion arose in you and caused your butter-like transcendental heart to melt. O Bhagavan, you then appeared before me in the form of Sri Guru, who cut asunder the ignorance of lust and so forth. With your darshan, you, like Sudarshan, the disc weapon, severed these crocodiles of suffering and saved me from their terrible teeth. With the desire to make me a maidservant at your lotus feet, you had the syllables of your mantra enter the pathway of my ears and remove all of my pain. Through my repeated hearing, chanting, and remembering of your divine names and qualities, you purified me. The spiritual master is a representative of the Supreme Lord. In one sense, is a direct representative, is directly the Lord, in the sense that they are a transparent like they are, the Lord is directly inspiring them how to act, how to speak to the disciple, to guide the disciple to the Lord's lotus feet. The spiritual master is thus worshipped on the same level of God, although the spiritual master is always understood to be a servant of God. But it's like a type of expansion of Krishna is the spiritual master, the guru. So there's a simultaneous oneness and difference there. But ultimately, we know that the spiritual master is a servant of the Lord. But because of his dearness in heart to the Lord directly inspires him how to guide the devotee. And so in that way, he's considered to be an external representation, external manifestation of the super soul in the heart. Because the spiritual master is directly receiving the dictation of Krishna and is therefore guiding the disciple exactly according to how Krishna personally would guide the disciple. We should have that kind of confidence and vision. The devotee continues, O Lord, O Prabhu, you taught me the art of rendering devotional service to you by granting me the association of your devotees. Nevertheless, because I am unfortunate, foolish, and the most degraded, I could not render even a day's service to you. Still, even though this most wicked person is punishable, instead of chastising me, you are making me drink profusely the sweet elixir of your sublime darshan. So the devotee with prema is extremely, extremely, extremely humble. They think very little of themselves because they realize the greatness of Krishna and the greatness of the devotees. Yet, Lord, you say, I am indebted to you. O best of masters, it seems I am being mocked by these words coming from your divine mouth. Now what should I do? I've committed several, no, thousands and millions of offenses. To pray for pardon would be nothing but taking refuge in impudence. Certainly my offenses are incalculable. Moreover, the powerful influence of my persistent offenses is such that even now I endure their results, and therefore let me suffer further for the offenses still remaining. I will not pray to be pardoned. So the devotee has no desire, a pure devotee on the level of prema has no desire to avoid material suffering. Rather, material suffering, they relish it in the sense that it intensifies their remembrance of Krishna, and they feel that it's appropriate that they would, there's a relief when we do something wrong and then we are punished for it. There's a kind of relief that this is what I deserve, and so finally I'm getting my just deserts. There's a relief that now in this punishment I will be relieved of the weight of my guilt and my sin. So the devotee, even though they're not offenses, they're not offensive. The devotee has already been forgiven by the Lord. The process of bhakti has purified the devotee of his offenses, but still the devotee reflects, thinking, I've committed so many offenses to you, therefore let me endure the punishment that I deserve. I don't deserve to just be pardoned like that. So this is just the humility of the pure devotee. Okay, so the remainder of the presentation today is going to discuss how one's false ego is spiritualized over the course of one's progressive development on the path of bhakti. Let me just check the Zoom room and see if there's any comments or questions here. I think I have to stop sharing really quick. All right, so looks like everything's good. I'll ask, are there any reflections, comments, or questions on what we've come? Yeah, go ahead, Agape Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for class. It's been great so far. One quick side comment. I love that you had some emo disposition to your false ego. I'm sure that I had a similar experience, and I'm sure that was helpful in accepting that the material world is a place of misery and
yes,
having a pessimistic attitude towards it.
Yes.
So I'm sure there was some thorn taking out a thorn in that regard.
Yes.
So my question is about this last point you're making about how Prema Bhaktis will see material misery as something that they deserve. And it got me thinking, well, for one, we discussed how offenses, they don't get completely eradicated until Prema. So it's interesting that once they're at Prema, where they're no longer suffering the effect of offenses, they're still seeing material suffering as that. And then I was thinking about this in today's context. In psychology today, it's really encouraged not to feel guilt. Like guilt is something that, instead of, I guess a lot of mental health comes from repeatedly punishing ourselves for past activities. But we're learning here that higher level devotees, that's what they're doing. And we're striving to emulate them. That's what sadhana bhakti is trying to emulate the Bhava Bhaktas. So my question is how, or is it even necessary to try and incorporate this modern day material? You shouldn't feel bad about things or feel guilty all the time. How do we either reject the material idea or on our sadhana level, still incorporate it to some degree? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally. the modern mental health field is very confused. And so we have to kind of be careful about, putting too much faith into so-called mental health experts. Because they don't understand how this world works, that it's actually, going on according to the law of karma. So there's very clear consequences to our actions. So the sense of guilt and the sense of shame in a healthy person is the voice of conscience saying, I did something wrong and I'm going to have to suffer the consequences for that. And I did something wrong and somebody else is suffering because of that. So the whole Western paradigm of suffering is to try to eliminate it completely. That's their idea of perfection. The perfect material technology will allow human beings to exist in a state devoid of suffering, even as they do all of the things that they do. They're trying to eradicate suffering from our lives through the various drugs and social welfare programs. It's all they have this idea that suffering is evil, basically. So guilt, because guilt is a type of distress, then they just say, well, just don't feel guilty, But then what happens is a person who just attempts to repress and shut off that natural psychological response to sin, to performing an act that is harmful for oneself and others. When you just try to shut that off, what happens is then you keep doing the things that cause harm to yourself and others. So you keep acting in a way that's degrading for yourself. And so you actually become more miserable, more depressed. That's why depression, it's like, okay, go ahead and turn off the guilt, but what about the depression that you feel when you live a life that's totally reprehensible? Okay, you've managed to stop feeling guilty about the fact that you're eating meat, the fact that you're, sleeping around with all kinds of other people, the fact that you're lying at work, cheating, all these things, you don't feel guilty, fine. But what about your depression? Can you just turn that off? Well, yeah, here, take these pills, So they're trying really hard to create a mental situation that is only pleasurable. But because they're not guided by scripture, they don't know what they're doing. They're really, shooting around in the dark with all of their mental health recommendations. So human culture, in a human civilization, guilt, shame, fear, these emotions that we normally associate with in like negative terms, we think of as negatively, they actually have a very, very important role to play. And particularly feelings of guilt and shame are vital in developing genuine humility. How shameful it is that we act in our relationship with the Lord. It's like one part of the day we are crying out for his mercy, and then the rest of the day we just do whatever we damn well want. Totally forget, oh yeah, Krishna exists. It's shameful. We should feel some shame, some repentance, some sadness. Like, what am I? Shame means, what have I done? What am I doing? What am I doing to myself? You know? So we have to kind of learn how to feel these emotions, because in the Western culture, we just repress them and we're taught that they're bad, you know, just like we're taught that lust is very good. I remember after I'd been practicing Krishna consciousness for a little bit, I realized that feeling that I used to think was like love, the most purest of things, was actually a totally selfish and destructive force. You know, lust, actually. I had been thinking all this time that when I had that feeling in my stomach or in, you know, my pulse quickens and my mind becomes very fixated on this particular woman, that's because I'm in love. It's very good. But no, not at all. Not at all. It means I want to use that person's body for my pleasure. I want them to basically become my subordinate servant and you know, worship me and you know, fan me and feed me and call me hero and, you know, all this totally stupid stuff that we get from our Western cultural upbringing, you know, and I think that's love, you know. So this is an example of a negative emotion that we mistake for a positive feeling. You know, and how it reveals itself as being negative is, you know, you can start to feel that it's like 1 minute you're in love with this person and all of a sudden another beautiful girl comes by and you start to feel, now I'm in love with her. Sorry, you know. So that just shows it's not wholesome at all. It's totally selfish. So similarly, guilt, we've taken it as a negative thing, but actually it can have a very positive quality to it. Same with shame. But yeah, we don't want to dwell in these things in a way that distracts us from Krishna. You know, Krishna says one shouldn't exalt in happiness or be overwhelmed in lamentation. So we should try to feel some guilt and some shame, but at the same time, you know, we have to, the actual forward movement in our spiritual life is just performing the activities of devotional service. So the litmus test of healthy guilt or healthy shame is if it helps us generate the spiritual strength, the courage, the integrity to give up degrading activities and habits, and to increase our spiritual activities and pursue spiritual habits. Is that helpful?
Very much so. Thank you so much, Prabhu. It just made me think of another thorn taking out a thorn.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So really appreciate your well-rounded answer. Thank you, Prabhu.
Jai Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
All right. I'm going to get back to the presentation, the second part of it, and we're going to kind of go through this quickly for the sake of time, but also because it's mostly this section will be review with some more little graphs, chart things that I put together. So our false ego, our sense of self, there's a sense of I, who I am, ahamta, and mamata. It also sometimes comes up as just aham and mama. So these are, it's, you know, the sense of I, the sense of my. So then when these words aham and mama are made into like abstract nouns, the ta is added on there. So the sense of I and the sense of mine. Real ego, Viśvanātha Ṭhākura describes, I belong to Krishna, I am his servant, and Sri Krishna, who is ever accompanied by his associates, his companions, is a great ocean of sweetness, sweet beauty and sweet qualities, and he is my master and the object of my service. So I am Krishna's and Krishna is mine. This is real ego, spiritual ego. And prema manifests as ahamta in relation to one's own transcendental form. So my spiritual identity, I no longer identify at all with this physical body, and I've manifested or awakened my spiritual identity. And mamata is in relation to Krishna's transcendental form, specifically the particular form of Krishna to which one is naturally attracted. As Kishore Krishna or Bala Krishna, the childlike Krishna. Kishore Krishna, the youth, the teen youth, the lover boy, is the object of attraction for those in Madhurya rasa. Bala Krishna, child Krishna, before the age of 5, is the object of attraction for those in Vatsalya rasa, parental love. And Poganda Krishna, or the boy Krishna, from the ages of 6 to 10 or so, that's the object of attraction for those in Sakya rasa. So this is how Viśvanātha Ṭhākura gradually describes the spiritualization of the ego. So at the stage of unsteady bhakti, unsteady bhajan, this is bhajana kriya and anartha nivritti, the spiritual ego has partially manifested. So we've got a little bit of inkling of our spiritual identity in a generic sense. I am a spirit soul. I am a servant of Krishna. This is the stage in which one receives initiation. One accepts a spiritual master. One attains is given a spiritual name, such and such das, such and such dasi. So there's some sense of spiritual identity, but still the material identity is very prominent, complete. I still basically identify as this is my life, this is what I'm doing, but the spiritual ego is starting to manifest. So in this stage, we'll review some of the slides from previous sessions. At this stage, one's anarthas are still significantly present. The anarthas arising from offenses, the anarthas arising from bhakti. So one still has a lot of anarthas one's struggling with at the stage of unsteadiness. So it's related to the fact that one still has significantly, their identity is still quite material. Although they have overcome a lot of their anarthas from sin and piety. So their sinful tendencies are significantly curbed, and their attraction to material life is significantly curbed. This is shown in their ability to commit to a spiritual lifestyle and make the vows of at the time of initiation of abstaining from gross sinful activity and so on. And the 6 characteristics of unsteady bhakti that we have been covering, utsamai, ganatarla, judavikalpa, vishaya sangbara, and niyamakshama, and turanga rangani. These 6 things are the things that the different areas that a devotee at this stage is struggling with. So this is all reflected in the fact that their identity is still quite material. And on the way to steadiness, they're struggling with these additional 5 obstacles, which are more general, which is the tendency to fall asleep, laya, vikshepa, apratipati, kashaya, and rasasvada. All of these are obstacles to steadiness that must be overcome in addition to those general symptoms of unsteadiness. And then the devotee gets to the next stage of steady bhakti, steady bhajan. So this is where one's spiritual ego is not quite as developed. Like there's still, even at the stage of nishta, one's identity, sense of identity is still more material than spiritual, but the spiritual is catching up. You can see it's pervasive versus the material ego, which is almost complete. Viśvanātha Ṭhākura uses Sanskrit terminology, but this is a pretty good translations. So it gives us an idea. And now at the stage of steadiness, one's significantly freed from the anarthas arising from sin and piety, and also from bhakti itself, but still the anarthas arising from offenses are quite prominent, but one's making progress. At taste, ruchi, now one's spiritual ego has overtaken significantly one's material ego. So at taste, once one has taste for Krishna consciousness, there's a much stronger sense that I am an eternal servant of the Lord and the Lord is mine. And the sense that I am this body and this material world and its objects are mine, my relations and so on, is significantly reduced. It's now at partial, which is just a little bit remaining. And taste, we mentioned, has three parts to it. First, it's described as just a strong pleasure or attraction for bhakti and the activities of bhakti that is far, far greater than the pleasure one gets from anything else. And then there's three components to this taste or this desire, which is the desire to attain the Lord, to be an agent for the Lord's pleasure, and the desire for the Lord's affection. At the stage of attachment, asakti, one's spiritual ego is now completely developed, and only a scent of one's material ego remains. And this is the description that we discussed from Viśvanātha Ṭhākura about attachment. Previously, at the stages of nishta and ruchi, only when the sadhaka's desire was accompanied by such active resolve could he almost fully withdraw his mind from material sense objects and focus it on meditating on the forms, qualities, and so forth of Sri Bhagavan. Upon attaining the awakening of asakti, however, even before the devotee desires it, that very same mind automatically meditates on Bhagavan's forms and qualities. So one's just can't help, at attachment, one can't help but think of Krishna. So there's only a scent remaining of his material identity. At bhava, his spiritual ego is now absolute, so it's a perfectional stage, spiritual emotion or bhava, and only a semblance of material ego remains. So just like some faint trace, the word given is abhas, only a semblance of material ego. It's not really there, but it's just partially there. And this is related to the fact that the anarthas arising from nam aparad are still affecting the devotee at the level of bhava. So their love is transcendental, but it's not fully mature. It's like the flower on the creeper of bhakti that has not yet given its fruit. And ecstatic love is also sometimes compared to a ray of the sun of Prema that is fully spiritual and softens the heart, but is just like the pre-light of dawn, the light of pre-dawn, before the sun has actually risen in the sky. And the spiritualization of the ego at the stage of pure love, Prema, is supremely absolute. It's fully developed, and no material ego remains. So at this stage of Prema, the varieties of ecstatic love, the different bhavas, will interact with each other and create many extraordinary experiences for the devotee as they engage in varieties of service to the Lord. These different varieties of bhava, sthayi bhav, anubhav, sattvika bhav, and vyabhichari bhav, which is also sometimes called sanchari bhava. That's supposed to say the internal transitory emotions. So anyway, Hare Krishna. That's the what we wanted to share today. That's our discussion on Mādhurya Kadambini. One other thing I wanted to just say is, so as we are progressing in our bhakti, we want to be constantly looking one or two stages ahead. First of all, we need to understand what the whole process looks like. Theoretically, we should think of these stages of bhakti like a map. We gave the analogy of driving to New York. in an earlier session. And so if you know where your destination is, how to get there, etc., then you can be very confident. Okay, this is this milestone. This is this milestone. You can be very confident. Your course is clear. But if you're unsure about where you're going, if you don't really know how to get there, and if there's a lot of fog clouding the road, then you're going to be very hesitant, and your progress will be very slow. So we need to know what the process of bhakti looks like in terms of sambandha, our relationship with Krishna, prayojan, the ultimate goal of our practice, and abhideya, the means to attain the goal. That's very important. As we're practicing, we should always be looking 1 or 2 stages ahead. Where am I at now? What am I struggling with? What are my main challenges? The first step is to qualify oneself to take shelter of a spiritual master and to pray to Krishna to reveal one's eternal spiritual master. It has to be revealed. It's not a matter of our own kind of picking and choosing, like going to a buffet. I'll have a little bit of this, I'll have a little bit of that. We shouldn't think that I'm the seer. We should understand that Sri Guru reveals himself just as Krishna reveals himself. So we should pray that our heart can become pure and that we can be blessed with that transcendental relationship, the transcendental shelter of a spiritual master, a genuine representative of Krishna. So we should hear from devotees, ask questions, try to understand what are the qualifications of a guru, what are the qualifications of a disciple, what are the duties of a guru, what are the duties of a disciple, and so on. What is that relationship supposed to look like, so that we know how also to recognize that a person is a qualified spiritual master. You know, it's not just a matter of feeling. We should be very careful, because one might feel something special in the presence of a person, but that person may not actually be a qualified guru. This is especially the case for people who are like self-proclaimed gurus. They don't have a disciplic succession, or if they may say that they have a disciplic succession, but it doesn't really hold water. You know, for instance, there's one Swami today who's preaching. He says he's preaching bhakti in Europe and India, but it's very questionable how much his teachings actually reflect the teachings of the disciplic succession that he claims to belong to. He also claims that he kind of is bringing in other disciplic successions, and kind of, it's like a little bit of a hodgepodge. So he's kind of presenting himself as like basically like an incarnation of God, and he's establishing his own new system of worship that's not based on a tradition like the parampara that we belong to, which goes back to Lord Chaitanya, and before Lord Chaitanya back to Krishna. So we have to be careful. We should know what are the symptoms of a qualified spiritual master. Just like if you want to buy a diamond, then you need to know what a diamond actually is. Otherwise, you might accept something false and waste a lot of money. So similarly, we don't want to surrender to a guru unless we can be confident that this person is representing Krishna, is teaching what Krishna teaches, and is devoted to Krishna, and can also help me become devoted to Krishna. Once one takes that step of initiation, then the next milestone is steadiness, nishta. One should apply the practices that the guru gives the disciple with the purpose of becoming further purified, further freed from material contaminations, anarthas, so that we can become steady in our practice, that we have our sadhana, our spiritual practices become the main priority and the main focus of our life. We, just like, you know, a person who really values their sleep will make sure that I block out this much time every night, from usually this time of night to this time of the morning, for sleeping, because I know that if I don't sleep, then I won't be able to function during the day. So similarly, for our sadhana, we want to try to block out this chunk of time every day that I'm giving to my spiritual practice so that I can develop strong habit and really go deep into my hearing and chanting. We also may want to consider gradually increasing our hearing and chanting so that we can make steps towards taste, which is the next milestone. Taste means that you like doing it more than you'd like doing anything else. So it's natural that you would want to do more of it. The best way to get taste for something is to do it more and more and more. So we want to increase our chanting, increase our hearing, but we shouldn't try to increase too much before we've obtained steadiness. If you try to increase without actually having some solid steadiness or regulation, then it'll just end up being kind of like all over the place. This day I chant 32 rounds. This day I'm chanting 4 rounds. This day I'm chanting 10 rounds. You know, that's not as helpful as just chanting consistently 10 rounds, then 12 rounds, then 16 rounds. So first strive for steadiness, then strive for taste. Another thing we can do is increase our chanting on specific days, increase our hearing and chanting on Ekadashi, increase our hearing and chanting on appearance days of the Lord, and so on. After taste, we're approaching attachment. So attachment means you're attached. You can't live without it. You're addicted. So that means you have to be increased in your hearing and chanting significantly, or some other direct limb of devotional service that brings you in direct contact with Krishna. Maybe it's worshiping the deity. Maybe it's book distribution, but some direct devotional service that is now practically taken over your life. We have to increase our bhakti to the point that it takes over our life, but that's down the road. That's attachment. So wherever stage we're at, we want to focus on the next milestone, whether it's taking shelter of a spiritual master, attaining steadiness in our spiritual practices, developing taste for our spiritual practices, or developing attachment for Krishna. After attachment, the next milestone is bhava. Bhava doesn't awaken until a person is able to perform his sadhana or her sadhana with attachment. This is mentioned in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So bhava, we should know, is the goal of our spiritual practices. It's the goal of sadhana. So all of the things that we do are meant to awaken this spiritual emotion, it's our spiritual identity. So we can be praying for that, but at the same time, it's very, very important to keep in mind the next milestone. For most devotees, that's nishtha, because most devotees, we're beginners. So we're just progressing. So that's my summary of the stages. And so at every step, we want to be looking ahead and accepting those practices that will be the most favorable for us. So any final comments or questions, reflections?
I have a question.
Yes, Daimai.
So you're just mentioning like how the spiritual master is revealed. And I was wondering if maybe you could speak a little bit more about that. It was reminding me of this book my Guru Maharaj wrote. It was like excerpts, I think, from classes and things. And he had like question and answer sessions. And one of the questions was like, how do you find your spiritual master? And I don't have the book with me, but I can kind of remember some of the points that he made. And it was like, if you feel like a particular spiritual master is more mercifully dispositioned, or you kind of like hearing from them, different things. So I was kind of taking it as like, it's revealed like it's a heart-to-heart connection, like you feel inspired to practice because of that person. So it's like a revelation in the heart. I don't know if you have any more insight or like you could explain that more.
So thank you for your question. This is really a really important point. So the scriptures give different qualifications for the spiritual master. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes what a self-realized person looks like, how they act. In the second chapter, for instance, that description comes in the latter portion, like in the 254 or something like that. Arjuna asks, how does a self-realized person sit? How do they walk? How do they speak? And Krishna gives different descriptions. Elsewhere, it's described that the spiritual master is fixed in Brahman. This means that they have no attraction to the material energy. Their senses are controlled because they're always engaged in Krishna consciousness, Bhakti yoga, and they're knowledgeable of the scriptures. So they are well versed in the Vedic texts, especially the Gita and the Bhagavatam, so that when people ask them questions, then the spiritual master is able to answer those questions in a way that resolves doubts, instills faith, and inspires practice of bhakti. So when we find somebody who is answering our doubts, answering our questions, dispelling our doubts, and inspiring us to practice bhakti, then that person is acting as like a representative of the spiritual master, or is my spiritual master himself. Ultimately, Guru is one. Krishna is the only Guru, and he sends so many representatives to this world to help uplift all the different living entities. So anyone who tells us to worship Krishna and sets a good example for worship of Krishna could be said to be a guru. One has one Diksha Guru, one initiating spiritual master, but can have many Shiksha Gurus. So we may find at different points of our life, different people are more prominent, helping us in our practice. And so we should try to be very eager to receive mercy from wherever it will come. At the same time, we need to be discriminating enough to distinguish mercy from poison. Just because somebody is very charismatic doesn't mean that what they're giving us is actually mercy. We have to be careful. We have to be knowledgeable enough in the scriptures to recognize when somebody is misrepresenting Krishna. So guru means representative of Krishna. It doesn't mean that the guru is Krishna. Any guru who says, I am Krishna, we should stay very far away from that person. Any person who suggests, I'm an incarnation of Jesus, or I'm the incarnation of Prabhupada, this kind of thing is very, it's not so prominent in ISKCON because ISKCON devotees have been very well trained. They know better. But there's a lot of self-proclaimed gurus out there that will say, I am this, I am that, and that's the first red flag. Anyway, that's tangential to your question, but I've just been hearing about recently I've been hearing about a few different gurus who they're doing that, and they have a very large following because people are innocent, they're ignorant, they don't know what they're looking for, they don't know what a guru is or what a guru does. So to your question about, how do we recognize the spiritual master? How do we feel? It has to be a combination of feeling and reason, that I can see this person objectively matches the description of a guru given in the Vedic texts. It's not just how I feel. But I should be able to see that this person's life actually resembles the description that Krishna gives of what a self-realized person, how they act. This person, their whole day is spent in service to Krishna. So that kind of thing, because sometimes our mind, we will rebel, it may think, is this person really my guru? I don't know. I don't feel that inspired about them. Maybe they're not my guru. But if they're objectively worshiping Krishna and absorbed in service to Krishna, then they're a guru. They're not just your guru, they're Jagat Guru, guru of everyone. Any pure Vaishnava is by definition Jagat Guru, guru of everyone. So we have to be careful that we're not thinking like of guru in too sentimental of a way, both aspects have to be there. Submission to one's initiating spiritual master, who's representing Krishna and serving Krishna, and also actively seeking out and begging and praying for mercy from all quarters, all directions, whether it's from the Shastra, getting encouraged and enlightened by the scriptures, by the devotees, the holy name. The holy name is Krishna. The holy name can give revelation. In our chanting, the deity. So we want to be eager to receive mercy from wherever it will come. And we should have a sense of our spiritual identity is I am the servant of my guru. And it's because of my guru that I have the opportunity to practice Krishna consciousness. We should cultivate a sense of gratitude, a sense of indebtedness. And that will help us progress more and more into the higher realms of bhakti. Is that helpful? I'm not sure if maybe I missed a part of your question. I kind of went on a few different tangents.
I appreciate that. Especially, I've thought about this also, like how like if someone is a bona fide representative, that relationship and the emotion can be cultivated through that service also. So
yes.
So thank you. Yeah, it was a really nice answer.
Yeah, we serve Krishna through our service to the spiritual master. And we also have a direct relationship with Krishna. Both are there, but it's on the strength of the spiritual master's mercy that we're able to have a relationship with Krishna. Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you all so much. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Viśvanātha Ṭhākura ki jai, Shri Madhurya Kadambini ki jai. Hare Krishna.